Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The conference had just ended, and the participants were outside celebrating with drinks and laughter. I didn't want to witness the typical post-conference revelry, so I quietly slipped away, hoping to find a calm place to eat alone. After wandering a bit, I ended up in a nearly empty bar, sat down at a table, and waited for my food. At that moment, a woman entered, about my age, with blonde hair and wearing a well-tailored business suit, and sat down next to me. She waved to the bartender, ordering a drink with obvious urgency. "Something strong, double," she said. She quickly drained her first glass and immediately ordered a second. Socializing isn't my strong suit, which my wife always teases me about, calling me one of the most reclusive people she knows. However, for some reason I felt compelled to say something. "Rough day?" I asked. She looked at me with her blue eyes, which glistened with unshed tears. Without responding, she silently finished her second drink, got up, and headed for the exit. But instead of leaving, she collapsed into a chair by the door, her shoulders beginning to shake with sobs. Not knowing what to do, I hesitated, then approached and gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "Sorry if I'm intruding. Do you need help? Maybe I can call someone or a cab?" Her tear-streaked face lifted to me, her eyes swollen with grief, her expression reminding me of a lost child. In that brief moment, it felt like my heart stopped. All I wanted was to comfort her, to assure her that everything would be okay. On the table nearby was a box of tissues and a bottle of hand sanitizer. I took a tissue and gently wiped her tears until her sobs gradually subsided. For a moment, gratitude flashed in her eyes. When her tears finally ceased, she looked me in the eye and quietly said, "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." She gave a weak smile. "Funny how it all started with your awkward attempt at conversation," she added, still smiling faintly. Before I could respond, she leaned in to kiss me. I instinctively turned my head, so her lips touched my cheek. I gently placed my hands on her shoulders and kissed her forehead. But she didn't stop. She came closer again, this time aiming for my lips. I hesitated. "Are you sure this is what you want?" I asked with doubt. Before I could rethink it, her lips touched mine, and any resistance quickly faded. My hotel was just a few minutes' walk away, and we went there together. However, throughout it all, a sense of unease lingered. This wasn't like me, and I wasn't sure I even wanted it. When we entered the room, she asked, "Mind if I use your bathroom?" I nervously sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sound of water running in the shower that filled the room. My stomach churned, and time seemed to slow down. When the water finally stopped, a wave of dread washed over me. She emerged from the bathroom completely naked, her blonde hair cascading down her shoulders as she approached me. She reached for a kiss again, but all I could think was, "I need to take a shower." Under the cold water, my mind raced frantically. The whole situation felt surreal, as if I had been ripped from reality. After what felt like an eternity, I emerged, put on a robe, and sat back on the edge of the bed. Nothing made sense. After a long pause, I finally reached out to her. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I didn't want you to misunderstand. I can't do this. I'm really sorry." She looked at me with an impassive expression and simply said, "Good job." Without saying another word, she dressed and quietly left the room. The next morning, my wife Amanda met me at the airport, smiling warmly as I approached. "How was the conference?" she asked with lightness in her voice. "Something strange happened last night," I began, still feeling anxious. Amanda's smile grew wider and she said, as if she knew something, "I already know." Surprised, I asked, "What do you mean, you know?" "The woman you met last night is a close friend of mine. We made a small bet. We wanted to see if our husbands would remain faithful. She lost. I won." It took me a few moments to process her words, and then the reality of the situation hit me like a wave. I could have lost everything I had built over 30 years, the marriage I cherished so much, but I passed the test. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. When I entered the house at 3 in the morning, Lauren was already waiting for me. The moment I stepped through the door, her first words, sharp and accusing, cut through the silence. "Where have you been all night?" Her arms hung at her sides, but her voice was full of rage. The intensity of her stare felt like it could burn right through me. "Come in," she added, but her tone was more of an order than an invitation. The dim light from the coffee maker caught my attention. Without saying a word, I glanced at it, hoping there was still some coffee left. She didn't respond, just kept staring. I grabbed my mug from the counter and poured the last few drops from the pot. Leaning against the hard edge of the counter, I took a long sip. The coffee was scalding hot, but it tasted bitter and stale, like it had been sitting there for hours, a nasty reminder of how the night had gone. I knew the questions would keep coming, and I didn't have to wait long. "Stevie, I've been calling you since 9 o'clock last night." Her words flew out fast, almost too fast. "I left you a bunch of messages. Your phone was off. I thought something had happened to you. You couldn't even call me back?" Her voice wavered, caught between anger and worry. She said all of this in one breath, her face flushed with irritation. Her eyes, red from what I guessed was a sleepless night, bore into me, demanding answers. She stood there in an old robe, arms crossed, nervously shifting from foot to foot. "So, where were you?" She leaned forward, gripping the back of the kitchen chair. "I got some bad news yesterday," I finally answered, my voice low and steady. I needed to be alone, to think. I didn't break eye contact, trying to gauge her reaction. Her anger started to fade as my words sank in. "Oh," she muttered, her tone softening, almost apologetic. "I didn't know. Why didn't you say anything?" She took a small step toward me, her voice now filled with concern. "It must have been something serious if you didn't come home last night. You could have called. I would have understood." Her worry seemed genuine. As my mind drifted back to the news I'd received, I knew she would have understood. "What happened?" she asked gently, her voice now full of sympathy, as if trying to break down the wall between us. I looked at her, the woman I'd spent 33 years with, the mother of our children, the one who had stood by my side for so long. I wanted to tell her everything, but the words felt heavy, hard to get out. For a moment I was back in the nightmare of the last few hours, trying to force myself to speak. Finally I said, "Yesterday, I lost my best friend." Her face darkened. "Oh no," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. She was about to say something, but it seemed the weight of what I had just said silenced her. "Oscar, for a second I thought you said your best friend had died. Jake's fine. He's alive. I talked to him twice last night, and he even went out driving trying to find you," my wife said, setting her coffee cup on the counter and turning to me with hope in her eyes. "I didn't say it was Jake, did I?" My words came out sharply, and the silence that followed carried the weight of everything I didn't want to say. I saw Lauren's face pale, her body tense with realization. She knew exactly what I had uncovered, the full extent of her betrayal and who it involved. "I just want to understand why." The private investigator's report laid it all out with unbearable clarity, more than I ever wanted to know. The suspicions had been eating at me for some time, but seeing the truth laid bare was still like a punch that knocked the wind out of me. "Lauren, how could this happen? The thought had never even crossed my mind." "Oscar, it was a stupid, meaningless mistake. It only happened once, and it won't happen again. We can get through this. You're the only one I love," she pleaded, her voice trembling, her eyes filling with tears. But the lie was too weak to hold up now. After everything I had seen, after listening to the recordings and staring at those pictures, there was no room left for reconciliation. Fortunately, the kids were already grown and independent, so they didn't have to witness this nightmare. About 10 minutes later, while I was packing my things for the next few days, I heard her talking on the phone. Her voice was quiet, the words barely audible through the door. "Oscar, I'm so sorry," she whispered, but the apology felt hollow, coming far too late. I didn't even turn around when I said, "I'll come back for the rest once I figure out where I'm going to stay." There was no need for goodbyes, no last kiss, no whispered promises. I walked out of our home, perhaps for the last time, without looking back. I felt shattered, as if the ground beneath me had disappeared. How do you move forward when the woman you trusted most is no longer by your side? How do you lose both your wife and best friend at the same time and find the strength to keep going? It seemed I would have to learn somehow. 3 months passed, and our divorce was finalized. Lauren had to move out of my house with 20% of all our assets, as outlined in our agreement. I often met with our children, who were shocked by their mother's actions. I continued moving forward, finding new interests and relationships. Less than a year later, I received the sad news that Lauren was terminally ill and in serious condition. Our children asked me to visit her in the hospital, but I believe that woman doesn't deserve my attention. I think she took 33 years of my life from me, and now karma has caught up with her. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.